think we need music in
Yeah, we
opening
do.
segment.
Well, we won't sing.
No.
No singing.
No singing. Welcome, everybody. This is episode 2 of Two Dudes Arguing Over Beer, which we'll describe what that means in just a second. But my name is Tim Ryan. This is my friend Jerry Ring.
Hello.
We've known each other for quite some time. We are Ring and Ryan Incorporated. And
Not a real company.
yeah, we're not really incorporated. We're not a real business. This was a name. At some point, we will reveal like why on earth we're called Ring and Ryan Incorporated. But we are. A long time ago, some near 50 years ago, Ring and Ryan Incorporated was formed. But this is episode 2 of Two Dudes Arguing Life Over Beer. And that is what it means, right? We're just two dudes. We don't claim to be anything other than two dudes. We're going to argue life.
Discuss, debate.
Yeah, hopefully, I mean, we
Learn.
may argue, but hopefully, that's not the point of it. We're not here to outright argue over beer. The one thing that we both agree on is that from the very early days of our friendship, we really do enjoy beer. And in life, right, so we met when we were 15 turning 16. And
A little more hair back then.
yeah, this was pure black. But in those, and this wasn't even possible, I don't think.
You were just starting to shave.
But life as a teenager, very, very simple. I don't know that we couldn't really argue life because we were just starting to learn life. We were just trying to experience life. So opinions had not really yet been formed on life issues.
The priorities were getting a car, sports, and getting the nerve to ask a girl out on a date.
Yeah, and that did take
Quite a lot.
quite a bit of nerve. But as time goes on, and those of you who watched episode 1, you'll remember us discussing this. As time goes on, you start to develop opinions on life, develop preferences in the way things go. You may start to learn a little bit about politics, and you may discover that you lean one way or the other.
And life gets more complicated, but also our role in the world changes. We go from being just a kid on a bicycle to now having to get a job, deal with other people, make an income, support a family. So our roles change. Therefore, our views change with that and with our experiences.
100%. And shortly after high school, we did what was expected of us as 18-year-olds. We both went to college. I spent 2 years and then went straight to the workforce. Tried to become an entrepreneur. Well, I did become an entrepreneur, and that was my goal. Jerry spent 15 years in college.
Not quite.
15 years in college. That is why he is a libetard.
And Tim is a deplorable.
What am I going to do? But
we're still friends.
I do believe that his views are that of a libetard, but it doesn't mean he's not my friend. And that is what really the point of this show, this discussion is that you can disagree, and hopefully you can find room to simply discuss that.
And also you probably have a lot more common ground, shared interests or shared agreements than we really understand without talking first.
Yeah. I do think that if people would discuss issues or just life, I think that in the end, most of us, not all of us, most of us, our goals are the same.
Yes.
How to get there might be different.
Right.
But in general, I think that we were aiming for the same goal.
Absolutely.
We just might take completely different ways. So last episode, Jerry, we were discussing beer. So similar to our differences in our life opinions, even though we both really do enjoy beer, we're not the same. So last month I brought a blonde beer, because Jerry prefers the lights, and I prefer the darks. So I actually brought the darkest one I had in the fridge, which was a chocolate bock, and it is dark.
And yet we both then tried each other's beer, and there was some enjoyment. We both enjoyed the other type.
Yes, so much to my surprise, I really was pleasantly surprised. It had a lot of flavor, which is my goal in beer, is that it's not just, watered down. It had flavor. So our topic, this is where it gets interesting. Our topic today is immigration, and it could get a little heated. Again, we may find common ground, but so our beers today, one outright full-blown American, the other is an immigrant import. The standard Samuel Adams Boston Lager, my favorite beer since the 80s.
Good Patriot.
And Modelo Negra. This Modelo Negra was, how do I say properly? It was illegally smuggled into the United States of America in my suitcase when returning from Mexico, where I overordered some Modelo and brought it back. But I guess we'll get into the conversation of immigration. But even with our beers, you can see that there is Is there Schmeck on top of that? We got it good?
Yeah, I'm okay.
Even with our beers, listen, there are lots of great immigrant beers that have emigrated from other countries.
And we're going to point out, I'm pouring this in for Tim, a beer from Mexico in a glass that says Ireland, that just represents all the level of immigrations from different places in this country.
So you got the Sam, this is the Modelo?
Yes.
All right, here's the two dudes arguing life over beer. I really do. I do like this. This is one of the closest beers. So Sam Adams is my go-to beer, but Modelo Negro is one of my favorite when I'm not home and I can't get a Sam. This is one of the ones I like.
Now, in the interest of learning and sharing and understanding, we're going to change beers and also try the other person's beer.
That's interesting because I've never, even though this is my go-to, I've never did a direct comparison.
Okay. Slightly different flavor.
I think it's a similar tone.
Yes, it is similar tone.
This
it's a little
is
darker.
A little bit darker with less effervescence. This has a lot of effervescence. This has got some bubbles. This has got This is more beer-like. This is more stout-like, let's say, a little creamier.
But not as dark as a full stout, but a little bit more body to it.
Hardly. This is close to a stout.
Yes, correct.
That was close to a stout.
Yes.
All right. This topic of immigration goes well beyond beer, shall we say. But, Jerry, I thought we'd start by just discussing, let's just look at somewhat of the history of immigration in the United States. And we can start that by discussing our grandparents, right? So my Irish grandparents were direct immigrants from Ireland. They emigrated as teenagers, believe it or not. As soon as they became legal in Ireland, off they went. They got on a ship and
that must have been so scary to leave family, leave a homeland that you know, and get on a ship spending 2-3 weeks crossing the Atlantic.
I have often thought about that. Even the people today, like I couldn't imagine myself up and moving to another state.
That's right.
Never mind another country.
Right.
My Irish grandparents, both Ryans, by the way, from two different parts of.
Oh, really?
Yeah, two different parts of Ireland. They met here.
Okay.
Married, had my dad, and his brother, my uncle. My Italian grandparents were born here, two very, very non-English speaking Italian immigrants. I really wish I remember the days of that. I don't know when that happened. I really should have looked that up. My Irish grandparents were like 1916. My Irish grandparents, because he was 18 when he got here. He was born in 1898. Jerry, do your grandparents have a history?
Yes,
Did they emigrate?
Yes. And actually, so there's the family law, but I did do the 23andMe test and confirmed the family law. And the 23andMe test is very interesting because it tells you not just where your heritage is, but it kind of narrows it down to a county or a part of a country. So my father's father was born here, but his parents came from Ireland, County Cork. His wife was actually born in England, and her parents came over a little earlier. So she came over. The story is she came over when she was 10 on a ship from England to America and went through Ellis Island. Which, if you haven't toured Ellis Island, it's very impressive.
Yeah.
To think about the amount of humanity that went through that island and then poured into New York and changed the character of the country, and added a lot to the country. On my mother's side, her mother came from Canada, a small town in Canada. She came down here when she was 18 to work as a governess. And I said, Grandma, you left home at 18 and you traveled to a different country? You know, grandmas don't do that. And her husband, he was born here in Newark, but his descendants were from Italy. So I have Scottish, British, and Italian, Irish blood from Italy. But his parents came from Italy. And they all, came to this country and added value to this country.
Right. I'm a straight up McGuinea. Like I'm just it's Italy and Ireland. But before we're going to get deeper into this, but we're going to take a break shortly. But I just want to ask you, Jerry, when your grandparents came through or great-grandparents came through Ellis Island, as did mine. But I do remember when I visited Ellis Island, two very important things. When you got here, you did need a sponsor. You needed somebody who was going to take responsibility for you. And you had to be healthy. Because I remember at Ellis Island, they showed you the quarantine areas. And if you were not healthy, you got shipped back.
Right.
Like I found that really, really interesting.
It is. So there is an element of, yes, we want you to come, but we cannot be, for lack of a better word, the welfare state for the world.
We can't be your nanny or your governess. You have to be. You have to have a line in. Well, people will take care of you. We're gonna,
and yet I can only imagine. I'm sorry, from a human perspective, what that was like. How scary it was for people coming here to not know after 2-3 weeks on the ocean if they were going to make it.
Can you imagine?
Yes.
Can you imagine? Yeah. All right. So we're going to take a quick break from our sponsors at the moment. Still, I'm the sponsor for now.
Very good
My
sponsor.
Genetics company. We'll see if we can change that. But Bobby's in the back. We're going to take a break. Thanks. All right, thank you, Bobby, for that. By the way, the first commercial there was for hydration, the exact opposite of drinking a beer. We do know we need to be
drinking plenty of water and eating healthy.
To the Modelo, this is not hydrate. All right, welcome back, everybody. So let's get into a little bit more detail about immigration, and I guess we'll just ask. I'm going to ask you this question straight up. When you look at immigration, we can discuss in the past, but I really want to discuss immigration today. Mm-hmm. Give me your good, your bad, your pro, your con. Just throw it at me. Tell me what you're thinking.
It's a good question. We talk about immigration as one word, but it's really multi-level, multifaceted. Certainly in the past, just staying there for a second, immigration contributed tremendously to the development of this country. jobs. We building the railroads, building the factories, working in the factories. The story is my great-grandfather built the subway tunnels. And the cultural impact and the different ideas all helped make America what it is today, absolutely. But as you alluded to, there was a bit of a filter, a threshold to come into the country. You just couldn't walk into the country. The impact also, though, can be negative. It can impact negatively an economy. It can overwhelm an area. And it could overwhelm a culture. We do have to appreciate how important a culture is with guiding a society, shared norms, shared values. Although at the same time, you don't want to be eating the same food every night. You want to have a little diversity. It helps you grow. But too much immigration can overwhelm. Let me just, so one observation is, I grew up in Flushing, Queens, and the area in Flushing, Queens was experiencing a decline. The stores I remember from childhood had closed up and people were moving away. Now you go back and it's a vibrant area, a vibrant community, stores and tall buildings, but the signs are not in English. It's a different culture. It's a different population. I rode my bicycle around Flushing Meadow Park, a big 800-acre park, and we used to go there as kids and have barbecues. I'm riding my bike around, and I will say I'm the only probably American that I'm seeing.
This is recently.
A couple of years ago, and most of the people I'm seeing are from, I'm going to say, I believe, Central or South America. Oh. And at first I'm like, well, I feel awkward. This is odd. Almost like, these people shouldn't be here. Then I look at them more closely and I realize they're playing games, they're playing sports, they're barbecuing, they're with their families. So they're human. So that said, though, immigration can add a lot of value to an area. It can help the economy, but it also can be problematic. It can overwhelm a culture, overwhelm a neighborhood to the point where it's no longer recognizable, and the roots of the past are lost, and it can also overwhelm the services of a particular area.
Yeah.
And yet, those like schools, and yet those groups can also contribute to the development. So I think it could be both good and bad. It depends on how well it's managed.
All interesting points. It's funny that we bring up schools. When I was in the photo and video business, I had an account of an elementary school in Jericho, New York, on Long Island. And it was an elementary school, so I recorded and photographed their graduation ceremony and a circus that the kids put on. And I don't remember the years, but I'd done it for many, many years. And when I started doing this was a primarily white town. These were white kids, mostly. A few Asian people, a few black people, but it was mostly white. When I finished, because I retired from that business in 2019, so my last job doing that was 2019. It was 90% Asian. And so I don't know if this is humorous or not. I was chatting with a friend yesterday, and we were discussing sporting teams because we're from Massapequa. We compete pretty well in certain sports. And I made reference to Jericho, and we don't see them in competing in sports. And I'm like, wow, what happens? Because it changes the culture.
And the emphasis, what people focus on.
So
yes.
I would guess that they are very good, and it's going to sound so
careful.
Yeah, I know. But I mean, I'm sure they compete intellectually, musically, in other areas, but not necessarily in sports.
Right, probably the sense is that their culture emphasizes, we assume, certain things, academic, and a lot of times immigrant groups will do that. They want their kids to advance. They're going to focus on schools and education.
Yeah.
And their athletic sport orientation is maybe different than ours from what they played in their country.
So you made another reference to something that is a little bit of a, I don't want to call it a problem for me, but it is an issue that I think immigration needs to address. And you made reference to, your hometown of Flushing, and the signs are different, and the people that were in the park. I do have an issue with assimilation.
Yeah.
I really have a problem with assimilation, because if you come to these United States because you want to live here, I do assume you're going to assimilate. I didn't say change.
Right.
I didn't say change your culture. I said assimilate. Yeah, diversity in food, diversity in all sorts of things. But if you leave a country and come here, I'm assuming it's because you think it's better.
So I agree. It's very important to assimilate. I remember hearing how joining the army in the past, when there was a draft of World War II, did help different cultural groups assimilate. But I think there's a trend that we have to appreciate, is that very often the first generation into a new area can often overwhelm that area and be a little closed off from assimilating. It's almost the second generation that tends to assimilate more. So I'm thinking Lower East Side of New York. When the Italians came over, maybe the Jewish people came over, they lived amongst themselves initially, and it was their little new culture. But then they ultimately assimilate. We are probably seeing something similar. I remember a neighbor's grandmother who lived, with them. She always spoke Italian, and so she was not going to assimilate, but her kids definitely assimilated,
Right.
And their kids, the grandchildren did assimilate.
This is where I definitely have issue. I mean, there are communities upstate New York that have 100% taken control of the school systems, of the government. They just simply bought enough property to control the entire town and live it their way. We could look at Sharia law, and there's towns in Minnesota, that apparently, now I haven't been there, but apparently the police won't even go to because they have zero control. This, to me, this is not healthy immigration. It's just, I have a deep problems with these things.
Right. So any group coming in should assimilate, and probably will ultimately, as much as they'll try to resist it. And absolutely, they should not. Our rules and laws and norms should still remain in effect. So a city or a town cannot abandon the state law and the courts and follow the Sharia law. It would be wrong for that state to permit that to happen.
But the fact that they are and are not doing anything about it, like, do you have an opinion on?
I'm not familiar
that?
with the situation, but I would not want any church law, any religious law, to be superseding in civil affairs the civil laws that are in effect at that place and that location. So if a religious law was to say, I'm going to go extreme here, if you're caught stealing, you get your hand chopped off. And if somebody gets caught stealing, that town has no right to chop someone's hand off because it's a violation of the constitutional right of, no unusual punishment, and probably against the state law as well. So yes, in the area of civil behavior, the state laws and the federal laws need to prevail. If they're not being enforced, then that's the fault of a locale that should be rectified.
Seems to be problematic in many communities across this country right now.
But I would say that certainly could be the case in certain areas, but we have to also be careful about attributing the outliers or some situations to the whole group. I think many immigrants who come here do want to come here to work and to just have a better life, and are coming from a more difficult area. Now they probably do want to carry some of their home with them, if you will, their culture, their tradition. I'm thinking, Italians and Irish and Germans who've come over here bring with them a lot of their culture and traditions, and then it gets assimilated in the larger country.
It gets assimilated. I think that's
Over
the
time.
key word. Listen, my grandparents came, my great-grandparents came. Yes, I think that my grandparents in Brooklyn, it was primarily Irish Catholic, and the Italians were in Staten Island. It was primarily Italian, even when I went there as a kid. But they listen. They spoke English and did everything completely as American as they could. Listen, we're going to get a little bit deeper into this. We're going to talk about the last 4 years. We're going to talk about the children of illegal immigrants. We're going to talk about the legality of citizenship, what's good and bad, right and wrong. But right now, we're going to take another break. Bob, you want to throw it to take us into break? That collagen elixir also is also not beer. That collagen elixir is why my skin still looks like I'm 20 years old. Why my hair, although gray, is still thick.
Boy, he has hair.
And my nails are so thick. Collagen elixir probably is the #1 product that we have, believe it or not. Yeah, it was introduced a few years ago. It's the #1 product. All right. Listen, during the break, we did argue a little bit. I don't know how much of that we don't have enough time to get into all these issues that we have here. But Jerry, I want to get into immigration today. What are we looking at today? I particularly am upset about the last 4 years of basically open border, millions upon millions upon millions of people entering our country unfettered, unchecked. I have so many issues with that. While other things are being controlled by our government, that was not. It made no sense to me. I still, to this day, pardon my rant, I still can't figure out the objective. Like, why were they doing that? I've watched a lot of videos that try to explain it. I am not smart enough to know if any of those are really true. But let's get into today's immigration, the problems that we're facing now, trying to one administration trying to undo what the previous one had done.
So I'm going to say first as to why I'm going to guess, purely guess, it happened is the immigration. We're talking about humans. We're not talking about an abstract thing like mining rights or a concrete thing. We're talking about people who are suffering in another part of the world. And
see, sorry that I have to interrupt you. I'm with you on that. But if that is all that was coming in, my argument would be a lot different.
I'm simply saying why someone may feel wanting to assist and help.
So I'm sorry.
Yep.
Do you believe that the previous administration to today was opened the border simply because so many people needed help?
I'm going to say yes. Yes, I don't think it was deplorable. I don't think it was to have, as people have talked about, white replacement. The white birth rate of this country has been decreasing, but I don't think that's the reason why the borders were allowed to be more porous than they should have been.
Well, that was a very kind way of describing it. More porous
than they should have been.
As opposed to open?
Yeah. I don't know if they were wide open because from what I've read, about 5 million people came in, but many of them were repeats. We caught some, we put them back, and they continue to come in.
The number is like 15 million, and they were coming in caravans.
I read 5.
We read different papers.
They read different papers, which actually is important to get the facts because misinformation could result in bad decisions. Whether it was 5 million or 15 million, I'll go back to the prior administration. Trump 1 was trying to build a wall, and the wall, I think 47 miles were built out of 1,000. And there was no effort to, I'm aware of, to really do other things to improve the border, to make it less porous besides the wall. The next administration, Biden, did allow, there's more illegal immigration under Biden, did open, I don't know if it was a pure open border. I never heard that the border patrols were removed, but more people came in. I'm going to say under this current administration, I have concerns about what this current administration is doing as well, particularly when it comes to the Constitution. Illegal immigration is an issue. To me, the bigger issue is bending or breaking the Constitution. As Benjamin Franklin said, anybody who's willing to give up their liberty for security will get neither. If we allow arrest and imprisonment without due process, even if for seemingly understandable reasons, it becomes a slippery slope to ignoring key elements of the Constitution that are there to protect against tyranny and support liberty.
Okay. I almost entirely disagree.
And what do you disagree
Okay,
on?
so
What do you
if
agree on?
you came over that border illegally, and we can get into the variables in that and who exactly they were, you came in illegally, you're already a criminal.
Okay.
So by default, I don't know why people think that they deserve some sort of due process.
But
if you're a criminal.
No, hold on. Wait, okay. If you steal a loaf of bread,
Yeah.
you're a criminal. But the government can't put you in jail without a trial, without a due process.
Yeah.
It doesn't say without due process to take away your civil rights.
Simple question, Jerry. Simple question. The person who stole the loaf of bread, an American citizen or an illegal immigrant?
For the moment, it doesn't matter.
Of course it matters.
No.
Of course it matters.
How do you know the person is? There should be a due process to determine that confirm that person is an illegal immigrant. I'm not saying a trial, but there should be some sort of due process to confirm that it's not just hearsay, because I don't carry around my birth certificate, that it's not just hearsay or a tattoo. Now we have in the prison in El Salvador somebody who is not supposed to be there. The Supreme Court has said that person should be released.
Yeah.
Now, okay, but even forget that person for a second.
Are you talking about the Maryland dad?
Yes. Yeah.
You believe that he is really a Maryland dad, not a gang member, not a criminal record.
I'm going to go by the courts. The courts have said.
The previous courts, he's been in court, said he is an illegal immigrant, he's a criminal, and has to go. The fact that he eluded them for so long, like you want another trial?
The Supreme Court has said that the United States government should facilitate his release. The United States government has acknowledged that he was wrongly put into the prison.
Okay. That's fine.
But actually, no. But let's put that one aside for a second. The other people who were swept up in that, there was no due process to confirm that they are indeed illegal immigrants. Gang or not gang, doesn't matter that they're illegal immigrants. If they are legal immigrants, we can deport them. But we didn't just deport them, we have imprisoned them. We're paying El Salvador to imprison somebody who there was no due process to determine that they should be in prison. If we want to deport them, there should be due process to confirm that they are legal, in which case they are deported and they're sent back to their home country.
I'm getting very itchy.
What is the prison sentence for illegal?
I'm not going to get into that because I don't even know.
I don't know either.
I don't know.
But what's the prison sentence in El Salvador for these people?
Let's look at the difference here, right? So where do we possibly agree, right? So if you are coming to the United States from a country where you are oppressed, you are in trouble, you are in danger, I 100% believe that there should be not easy, wrong word, a quicker way to facilitate legal immigration to this country.
So I agree with you on that. And I'll even say it should not be at the border. That 1980s law that had people come into the border to say, I've been persecuted, is neither good for them nor good for us. So first off, if you have a legitimate reason to request asylum, it could be handled differently in a more humane way. Secondly, I agree, well, I'm sure we're going to agree that illegal immigration is bad for the country and for the illegal immigrant. I'll even add to that, while I could be sympathetic with the desire for somebody who's maybe in a bad area or a depressed area to want to come to a better one, and the temptation, we're all human. As a good neighbor, we probably could be doing more to help some of those countries and the people in the country so they don't want to come here.
That's a very different topic.
It's a different topic.
I actually heard George W. Bush give a presentation, I was recording it, about a very similar topic, and I was stunned. It was about Africa, and it was about money that we sent to Africa and what we were doing with it there. And his reasoning was really exactly that. It was very, very logical.
It's a challenging exercise. I'm not going to deny that.
Yeah, he did not want these. It was a lot to do with AIDS. He did not want these orphans to become terrorists.
Yeah.
And so I really did understand it. So I'm not opposed to all of that.
Yep.
My issue is big time that the border is porous
and it should not be. And it should not be.
So now we have 5 million or 15 million. Let's just stay with 10 in the middle there. Let's say it's 10 million illegal people in our country. I believe the bulk of them don't belong here. That these are not people who are seeking asylum. These are many of them bad people.
So I'm going to disagree with you on that. Even the ones that were sent to El Salvador, most of them, I believe, had no criminal records. Maybe they were in a gang. So I don't know that we can say the bulk of them are bad. There's two waves, if you will. There's the wave of the last 4 years, and then there were those who came into this country before that and are illegal. What I would like to see, and it's been proposed in Congress, is if you're in this country illegal for more than, let's say, 5 years, if you could document that, you establish yourself in this country for more than 5 years. You're probably adding economically to this country, and you have not committed a crime. No path to citizenship, but there could be a path to being legalized if you're here working. Because economically, the cost of deporting everybody and the cost of to the actual deportation in the economy will be extreme. I could see where you make a path to legality, legalize somebody who's been here more than 5 or so years. If you're a child in that category and you're going to have a longer life here, perhaps that child can have a path to citizenship. If you were brought over at 4 and you're now 20 and you're going to be here contributing to society for a long time.
I have to interrupt you. I'm not going to disagree with that. Again, not being smart enough to really know the ramifications of this. So you broke the law, right? You're a criminal. And I don't care if you did it 20 years ago or 20 days ago. It's illegal. You shouldn't have done that. How do we fix that? I don't know. So I'm not going to completely...
I agree with this breaking the law, but to me there's a difference between being an armed robber who's greedy and somebody who's desperate for safety or a better life for their family.
I don't know. That that's true.
To me, it's the. Let me just say, you're starving. You see a loaf of bread. Your family's starving. I understand the temptation to steal the loaf of bread, and to me, that person, that criminal, and yes, it's a crime, warrants a different punishment to fit that crime than a crime of somebody who's... An
American citizen who is hungry and is tempted to steal a loaf of bread could have got on a food line, could have got food stamps, could have gone to a shelter. There's a million things that we offer.
I'm not saying there's American. So if you think about a situation, a location where a hurricane has come through, and there's destruction.
You're going way in a different direction.
But some of these people in South America
that is, again, completely different story. Change the way it works, give them a quicker, faster, but we have to know who they are.
That's fine. That's fine. I could see.
I'm not, listen, my grandparents came in, my great-grandparents came in, they were checked, they had a place to go, everything was in alignment with growing the future. It was also very different in the early 20th century.
So I'm going to say two things. One, Yes, the country was still growing in those days. We're more mature now. And two, as you pointed out in the beginning, even at the Ellis Island, the United States then even did not try to save the world and save everybody in the world.
Yeah, they sent them back.
And because if you do that, it's almost like being on an airplane and they say help yourself first and help the next person, because otherwise you both get hurt. So we have to give up the hope of saving everybody. In the world.
We can't do that.
We can save them where they live or help them where they live too. Go ahead.
Quick story, and I hope I can do this quick. This was probably a good 10, 12 years ago. And, I was in the wedding and events business, and I was invited to go speak to the Hispanic photographers and videographers of Los Angeles. And I was like, okay. I said to the host, I said, I don't speak Spanish. And he said, most of them do. And those that don't will interpret for the others. So I was like, all right. And I had a series of presentations I could do. They picked the one they wanted, and off I went to Los Angeles. And this room was packed. There's probably 100 Hispanic photographers and videographers in this hotel room somewhere in Los Angeles. And the event went very well. It went well. They asked questions. They were interpreting. I could see it happening as I was speaking. Good questions, everything. These were professional.
Did they laugh at your jokes?
I don't remember. I think so.
Did they translate okay?
I don't know. That I don't remember. However, when the meeting was over and I went out to dinner with the host, I said to him, you had 100+ people in this room. Why, when the convention was in Orlando, why were they not in Orlando? And he looked at me with a little bit of a smirk, and he was like, they're not going to Orlando. So I was like, all right. I said, but before Orlando, we were in Las Vegas. They could have drove to Las Vegas. Right. Why didn't they just go to Las Vegas, where they could have had all the programs?
Right.
And he went, Tim, I don't think you understand. They can't cross a border. And I sat there so naive, so stunned that these men, it was all men.
Right.
I said, these men run businesses. They all drove to this meeting and they're illegal? He says 90% of these men you met tonight are illegal immigrants. I said, how do they own businesses?
So besides going into that bureaucracy, and I don't know the answer to that, but I'm going to go from a social perspective. If we don't either incorporate them into our society or deport them, then we're driving them underground. And that becomes fertile ground for organized crime and gangs if they don't get social, either they're part of our system or they have to go back to their own system.
To your exact point, Jerry, what about the apartment building in Colorado where I don't remember which group it was, Trey, whatever they are?
Yeah.
They took over an apartment building.
And that's wrong. And the civil police should deal with that.
But you think that these men who did that deserve due process?
No.
Like, get them out now.
Absolutely deserve due process. Absolutely.
Oh, my God.
Otherwise, we're giving tyranny, we're surrendering to tyranny. We're letting the government
If you
decide.
did it, Jerry, if you did it, you're an American citizen, you deserve due process.
And anybody in this country, and the courts have concurred with this, deserve due process to first, if nothing else, determine that person is truly.
There's 10 million of them.
Then you have big courts. How do you know? But otherwise, there's a risk. There's a greater risk of getting people, citizens, who maybe disagree with the government, getting swept up.
You believe that?
Yes.
You believe that citizens
could be swept
American
up.
citizens
Yes.
who can go, here's my New York license, here's my passport.
You just told me that in California people were driving, and people are getting pulled off the streets. I don't carry my passport with me. So
I'm not buying into
and
it.
who is going to validate that person showed a passport? So wait, you've been on jury duty. When you're on jury duty, the police arrest, the court, the judge runs the case, and the peers, us, decide guilt or innocence. We decide to remove that person's civil rights. There has to be a way to confirm some sort of that the government can't be judge, jury, and prosecute and defend it.
We have to wrap it up, unfortunately, and we're going to agree to disagree in a lot of this. But I'm just.
Well, we agree on a lot. Actually, we do agree on a lot.
Yeah, but I'm simply going to say when when the Japanese hit Pearl Harbor, do they deserve due process, or do we just attack?
I'm going to say that's different. Japan was a country we had to fight back.
Okay.
The person in this country, the people who were interned in Japan in camps during the war were given no due process.
That I 100% disagree with.
And they were citizens.
Yeah. Oh, that was a big mistake.
Yes.
Big mistake. Nonetheless, I do believe.
And it was done out of fear, though. And that can drive, fear can drive a lot of bad decisions.
Yeah. I believe that these people today are organized, and these are organizations, and it is terrorism.
And you know what? The terrorists we have in Guantanamo Bay were given some form of due process.
All right. We do have to wrap up this last segment. A lot of this, we're going to have to agree to disagree because we didn't even touch the rest of these notes here. But Bobby, our last break, and then we're going to wrap it up and discuss our next episode. Thanks. Yeah, again, the greens are not beer.
Don't do what we do. Do what we say.
So damn good. All right, we're going to discuss our episode 3 topic, but I want to throw it to you, Jerry. And let's not discuss where we disagree because I think it's obvious. But in your assessment of what we just discussed, where do we agree?
We agree with that simple fact that this country was built by immigrants, and we're both products of immigrants in this country. The immigrants who came in then were largely legal. Our grandparents and great-grandparents were legal, and there was some sort of filtering on Ellis Island or throughout to remove perhaps people who were not going to be contributing to society, but perhaps be a burden. We'll also agree that the discussion of immigration is one of people, that we have to be somewhat humane, I think, and that we could be doing maybe more to help some of the people in their own countries to avoid the desire to come here. So I do think we agree on a lot. We disagree perhaps on how to deal with the problem that is here. And I guess one more thing, we both agree that during, I'll say the Biden administration, the open borders or porous borders, the numbers speak for themselves. 5 to 15 million people, if that's true, was wrong. It did not help this country, did not help the people. And something needs to be done about it. And that's where we disagree in terms of the what the government should be doing.
And that in and of itself would create a great divide between a deplorable and a libertard. We really, really have very visceral responses to some of those issues.
We can still close some of that gap by first confirming the legality, what's legally right, what's effective, and perhaps even still perhaps coming up with some sort of compromise within that. That I think it's still plausible.
Okay, so now we've already decided what episode 3 is going to be about. Let me just explain a little bit about that. Recently on Facebook, I put up a post where Pritzker, Governor Pritzker of Illinois, had said that he was going to do everything in his power to stop RFK Jr. and his his teachings, his methods, whatever it was that he said. Now, mind you, there's a photo of him saying this with his very large belly protruding over his belt. This is not fat shaming. I want to be crystal clear. This is not fat shaming. What this is, though, is that my post simply said that a man of your stature, right, you're governor, and you are extraordinarily obese, is in no position to tell a guy who is talking about health and well-being that we're not going to listen to you, because clearly you're not listening to anybody about your own health. Now, let me just say this. What ended up happening in that post, now I'm talking about obesity being unhealthy, period. That was the point of it. And that we, particularly as Americans, ignore all the lessons when there's so much available to us today. I speak from firsthand experience. I was obese. I was 75 pounds heavier. I was on 6 medications. I was Governor Pritzker, very unhealthy. And it wasn't until a doctor pointed his finger at me and said, this can kill you, did I change? Did I finally start to learn? Instead, that's all I was saying, instead they went, the libertards were basically saying that he's a quack, he is an anti-vaxxer, he has no knowledge. And I said, I was trying to defend myself, saying, I'm not talking about vaccines. I'm talking about obesity and the food system and bad food in America and dyes and all that stuff. But they wanted to just say that he's a quack and agree he should not be listened to.
So the deplorables are only focusing on one thing and using fear. Now, all joking aside, I think it's a good conversation. We both will be discussing something we're not experts on. But that said, I think we can find some common ground and some areas we're going to disagree in the next session.
So I'm not an expert, but I am knowledgeable on nutrition. I have experienced what nutrition can do.
And I don't think the issue is nutrition as much as science, but more for the next one.
Yeah, so we'll leave it at that, right? So health, well-being, vaccines, that'll be our episode 3. So cheers.
Until then.
Cheers to the deplorables and to the
libtards.
We'll see you next time. Shout out to Bobby. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for watching.